Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share Wendigo and Cryptids encounter stories. First story. This story was shared by you/no_deal_9616, so credits to him. I remember the last time my parents left me at home by myself. I don't know why, but I thought I'd share something that I still can't explain after all these years. I was 16, last year of high school, and my family had just moved to the outer suburbs of the city. Parents had left me alone for the night to go out, so I ordered pizza and watched some movies. What can I say? I wasn't exactly prom king material. Anyway, after finishing off 2 large pizzas by myself, like a boss, I decided to clear out the trash rather than having the living room stink of anchovies and cheese. So I went out the back door, only to have our 10-year-old husky Conan jump on me, trying to get into the pizza boxes in my hand. Whatever. Dropped the boxes and he starts flicking them with his nose. "Wanna come inside?" I asked him, but Conan just ignored me. It was late summer and huskies really enjoyed the nighttime weather. After a while, he got bored and walked off towards the back fence, obviously having dug a nice hole in the ground to curl up in. I picked up the empty pizza boxes and went through the side gate, walking out onto the curb where our trash cans were. It was night, but with the streetlights you could see where the trash cans were on the curb. Out of the corner of my eye was this hulking mass down the road. The streetlights were sparse enough that I could only see its shadow and the trash can it knocked out onto the street. It had to be a bear. It just had to be. Then I heard the most guttural, feral growl I had ever heard. I just noped. There was some sort of base instinct deep inside me that told me to get out of there as fast as I could. Like millions of years of evolution had embedded the most basic of survival reflexes. There was a teeny tiny part of me that wanted to see a bear in the flesh, maybe get a video of it and post it on the internet. I didn't even stop to consider it though, as I scrambled back to the side gate so fast I was setting records. That animal though, it must have seen me, thought I looked better to eat than the trash it was going through. Because as soon I headed towards the house, I heard this heavy stomping running down the street. I don't know what I was thinking. I probably wasn't, because I didn't even bother opening the gate, I just jumped over it. High jump superstar right here. Not bothering to look back, I headed straight inside and called the cops. I know. What would the cops do? Charge the bear with trespassing? Arrest Yogi and throw him in jail with a picnic basket? I was 16, I had never run into a bear, and I sure as shit was not going to call my parents. The phone rang as I frantically ran from one window to another, looking out for cuddly bundle of fun that wanted to crack me open like a honey pot. No sign of him. The phone picked up. 911, what's your emergency? Said the voice of an unenthusiastic woman. Hi, hello. I'm stuck inside and I think there's a bear stalking me. A bear, you say? She said slightly less unenthusiastically. That's when I got my first glimpse of it. I was looking out a front window when I saw it come into view right on my front lawn. It was big, like a bear. But then it stood up. I wasn't a 16-year-old expert on bears or anything, but I was pretty sure they didn't stand upright on their hind legs like a person. In the dark I couldn't get a good look at its fur, but just guessing from the silhouette it cast, it had to have been 10 foot tall, and let me tell you, when it turned its head to look through the window right at me, I had never felt the strength drain out of my body as fast since then. I collapsed onto the ground, barely holding the phone in my hands. Did you say a bear, kid? Said the woman on the phone. I shook my head yes. I then came to my senses a little bit and said yes. Is it just you in the home? Yes. My mom and dad are out. Alright, sit tight, sweetie. We'll get someone out there right away. After telling her my address, she hung up and I just sat there in the darkness, hoping that this nightmare would be over. I didn't know what that thing was and I didn't want to find out. Hopefully somebody else could deal with it and I could go back to life as normal. If I just waited. Howling pierced the silence. It was Conan. I had left Conan outside. Scared, my thoughts racing in my head, I army crawled through the house, through the kitchen, and to the living room. My legs sprang me upwards and I saw, through the back door window, Conan standing at the side gate, howling. I wanted to scream out, command that dog to shut up. The words nearly escaped my mouth before my hands involuntarily trapped them inside. I was too scared to scream out. Too scared to come out of hiding. Too scared to face that creature, to save my dog. Time slowed down. Conan had been a good dog to me. All the times we played together when he was a puppy, the nights when he curled up into a ball and slept on my bed, the sandwiches he stole from the bench, the tummy rubs, the head pats, the games of fetch. All of that was about to disappear because he wouldn't stop howling. No, it was about to disappear because I was too scared. I don't think I've ever done anything as dumb in my life ever again, but I ran out to save my best friend. I almost pulled the back door off its hinges and with eyes only focused on my dog, I charged and tackled Conan. Thankfully his howling stopped. It was only when I turned to the gate that I found out why. It was no damn bear. I got a full view of this creature, and to this day I still don't know what it was. I don't know how I missed it, but I saw its antlers. Its face was more like a deer, but it was bearing fangs like a bear. It was tall, taller than the gate, and it had its claws reaching over the top of the gate. Its eyes yellow, those yellow eyes were just staring at us. I didn't stare too long back, because I picked Conan up and carried him back inside. When I slammed the door, I heard something crash outside. I didn't look, but I just knew that the creature had broken the gate. I froze on the spot. Conan did too. He had his ears pinned back and laid down on the floor. Those same heavy footsteps from before came to the back door and I started to hear sniffing. Just sniffing, from the door handle and then down to the bottom of the door. Then it stopped. The footsteps moved away from the door and started going alongside the house. When it reached a window, I could see it was now on all fours, just prowling outside the house. After a while the footsteps disappeared. The police said they took 5 minutes, but it seemed like forever. They asked what happened and I told them about the creature, how it stood up, how it had a deer's head, how it looked at me with its yellow eyes. They just laughed. When Mom and Dad came home, they were pissed that the gate was broken. None of them believed me that I saw that creature. But I'm telling you, I don't know what I saw that day, but it was no damn bear. There are some creatures still out there that remain undiscovered. Second story. This story was shared by you/Steven_Killian, so credits to him. Most people think my job is pure nightmare fuel. I used to disagree with them. I work as a cell tower technician. You've probably seen videos on YouTube of some guy clinging to the top of a metal tower in the middle of a huge empty nothing. That's me. It's about the best job you can get where I live without a high school diploma, and the only real source of entertainment to boot. As a perpetual screw-up with an appetite for adrenaline, I was basically a star candidate. Really the only two requirements are a basic level of physical conditioning and a complete lack of fear, both of which I have. Or at least I thought I did. 2 weeks ago the company I work for, who shall remain unnamed lest the corporate overlords find this post, sent me out to a job site about 50 miles out of town. Rarely do I have to cross state lines, but the tower in question was about as far out of the way as it gets. Big 400-something odd feet, meant to bounce signals all the way across the Appalachian Mountains from one sleepy mining town to the next. That suited me fine. I prefer working where prying eyes won't see me for one reason: base jumping. For the uninitiated, base jumping entails throwing yourself off of a big object with a parachute on. You know, when you jumped off of the roof of your house as a 10-year-old with a blanket and broke your ankle and your stepdad came out and beat you with a belt before he drove you to the hospital? No. Maybe it's just me. Anyhow, base jumping is basically the grown-up version of that. Minus the broken ankle and the beating, hopefully. Luckily for me, secluded cell towers happen to be the perfect place for this kind of hobby. The morning I was supposed to head out, there was a fine mist sinking down into the hollers around where I lived. The locals call it moonshine weather, which translates to stay the hell inside and get drunk instead of go to work. As tempted as I was to do just that, I'd been hoping they'd send me out that way for months, and I couldn't pass up this opportunity. I should have trusted my gut. Instead, I brewed myself a shitty thermos of coffee, threw my gear into the back of my shitty Jeep, and, well, you get the idea. I drove a few hours out to the site, fooling myself all the way that the weather would clear up soon and it would be a sunny climb all the way to the top. I'd packed my parachute along with my other gear. I used to bring a GoPro along, until I realized that recording the sort of behavior that would give an OSHA rep an aneurysm probably isn't smart. I can be smart when I remember to. Anyway, I parked my Jeep outside the fence around the tower and typed the code into the electronic gate. Someone had strung razor wire over the top of it, but I doubted anyone visited much and the wire was crumbling in places. I figured anyone who really wanted to wouldn't find it hard to bypass. My suspicions were confirmed as I drove past the tiny maintenance shed sitting on the corner of the lot and found every inch of the corrugated metal covered in graffiti. I admired it as I opened the padlock and retrieved one of the bulbs from inside. The work order said this tower needed an aircraft warning light replaced. You know, those blinking red lights that let you know there's a giant tower out there in the dark. I took one from a dusty shelf and tucked it into my rucksack, threw on my climbing rig, checked my chute one last time, and started to climb. The start of a climb is always boring. One hand over the other, rung by rung. You're almost impatient waiting for that thrill that comes with dangling hundreds of feet above the earth. Or at least I was. But you have to pace yourself. A fall from 30 feet can be just as fatal as a fall from 400, and if I was going to go out I knew which one I'd rather take. Most of the time you'll see tower climbers clipping a carabiner to each rung to fasten themselves in place as they go. I don't bother with that unless it's a windy day. It wasn't. In fact, the air seemed unnaturally still as I climbed. If I were a wiser man I might have paid more attention to the prickle at the back of my neck or the sense of foreboding in my gut. But as you've probably guessed I am not, so I didn't. Instead, I chalked it up to coffee jitters and doubled my pace. Probably just needed to take a leak. Have you ever pissed off of a 400-foot tall object? It's just as awesome as it sounds. I was around halfway up when I realized that the fog around me had grown more dense rather than less, which was strange. Usually when you get a bit of height and the sun starts to burn away the mist you can see just fine. Typically it's all but gone by 2 p.m., leaving you free and clear to jump from the top. I'd already picked out a nice little meadow to the southeast of the tower where I could land and have an easy hike back to the jeep. If I couldn't see it, though, that would be a problem. I'm not suicidal after all. It looked like my dreams were shattered for the day. The fog around me was so dense now that if I hadn't known better I would have thought a storm was rolling in. But the weather forecast hadn't mentioned any chance of a storm, and there was still no wind. It was strangely silent, except for the dull ring of my boots on the rungs and my own breath in my ears. I paused to take a break around halfway up. There are altitude markers painted on the cell tower so you can mark how far you've come, and I just passed 150 feet. Clipping a carabiner onto the rung above me for the first time that day, I leaned back and stretched, enjoying the feeling of weightlessness. I glanced down, something the veteran climbers tell you never to do, and that's when I saw it. Down below me, shrouded in mist, a shape clung to the side of the tower. I say shape because I didn't get a clear look at it. Just a shadow, maybe 100 feet below. So far away that I couldn't really even tell if it was moving. The fuck? Now I know I'm not Shakespeare, but I doubted old Bill would have reacted any differently than I did. I mean, why would anyone be climbing a cell tower in backwoods Appalachia on a day like this? Anyone besides me, that is. My first thought was that it was one of the graffiti artists who, finding their skills limited by the canvas of the old maintenance shed, had grown the balls to climb the tower and add a little color to the gray steel. Good on them. Might make for a bit of an awkward meeting when they caught up to me, but I wasn't about to call the cops or anything. I even debated hanging around until they got a little closer, but decided against it. That was my first and only good decision that day. Probably the one that saved my life. I kept climbing, reasoning that if my fellow climber made it to the top while I was still around, I'd congratulate them on their courage and ask them nicely to paint over one of the lights so that the company would send me out here in a month or two and I could get my jump on. I reached the 200-foot mark and took another break, feeling the cool wet air on my cheek, scratching under my thick beanie. The company tells you to wear a helmet, but I figure that at heights like this I'd prefer my cranium to liquefy on impact if I fall. Quick and painless. I took another look down to see how my mysterious friend was doing. It was closer. I say it, because it took my brain a few seconds to register that the thing climbing up the tower toward me wasn't human. It had closed the distance between us by a few dozen feet and it was impossible to mistake. Its arms were too long, its body too short. I caught a glimpse of dark, glistening skin through the mist, a face twisting on a knobbly neck, two eyes that were as pale and milk-white, like an old man's cataracts. I blinked. It was still there. One long arm swung over the other with unnatural grace, a hand large enough to swallow the entire rung curling around steel. The fuck. Once more and with feeling. Now I'm not superstitious, or religious, or philosophical, or political, or really anything at all. I'm a monkey-brained tower climber, and when I saw the thing that was following me up the tower my monkey brain took right over. I scurried up the rungs throwing caution to the wind, my brain trying to account for what I was seeing. Some kind of prank. A TV show, right? With an absolutely insane budget. A dozen half-hearted attempts at reason flew through my mind, each one as pathetic as the last. I climbed until I was out of breath, and my mind, looking for excuses and coming up empty, swung back around to, did I really just see that? I risked a glance down. The thing was still below me, and gaining. It climbed in eerie silence. Not growling, or snarling like a wild animal. Just the quiet, fluid determination of a predator stalking prey. I caught a flash of movement, of a snub-nosed face, of naked skin and a mouth full of black teeth. I'd given an old meth head some change once and she'd flashed me a rotten grin full of teeth like that. There was only one way down now, and that was up. I climbed as quickly as I could, throwing caution to the wind. The 300-foot mark passed in a blur. 350, I was starting to flag, every breath burning in my lungs. I could taste copper in my mouth, and my eyes were blurry. I started to get clumsy. I missed a rung with my foot, almost falling. I clung there, terrified that I would feel long fingers close around my foot. I kicked the rungs once, then managed to get my boots back in place and kept going. I reached the tower's uppermost platform. The trapdoor was locked, secured by a padlock. Of course it was locked. I tore a glove off with my teeth and let it spiral away, fumbling in my pocket for the key. Nothing. My entire body was seizing with fear. The piss that I'd been saving for the top of the tower was running down my leg. I unhooked the hammer on my tool belt and bashed the padlock. It came open, bouncing off my arm. I shoved open the door and hauled myself through, landing on the small platform at the top like a trout from a creek. Through the grates I could see the thing right below me. It opened its mouth, jaw cracking to reveal a mouth that was too wide. Inside that mouth was another mouth, and another, and another. I screamed. Well, I did my best with whatever air was left in my lungs. It sounded more like a whimper, or a sob. I stood with my back to the top of the tower, watching as it moved half-hidden below me. I slung one leg over the railing at the edge of the platform and checked the straps of my parachute. The sky was gray in every direction. Nothing but endless, mind-numbing gray. Looking back I feel as though I should have at least had some idea of where the sun was, but there was nothing. Just an endless field of twilight. I couldn't tell which direction I was facing, or where the meadow I'd planned to land in could be. I'd be jumping blind. Into the fog. No idea of where I was headed or even how close I was to Earth. It was insane. It was my only option. As the creature lifted one glistening arm over the edge of the tower, ready to haul itself up after and grab me, I threw myself off. Normally this is where I let out a whoop, revel in the feeling of the wind on my face, the weightlessness. This time I fell in silence, eyes full of freezing tears as the cold wind scoured my skin and hair. I had a pair of goggles slung around my neck to shield my face, but I'd forgotten to put them on. I seized the ripcord and pulled for all I was worth. There was a reassuring snap of nylon against air, followed a bowel-loosening tug, and my feet kicked out in front of me. Thankfully instinct took over, giving my overtaxed brain a break. I glanced up and over my shoulder, wind whistling in my ears, but I could see no sign of the creature above me. I hauled on the steering lines, straining to see any sign of the ground below. There was nothing. A few long moments passed. Then I caught sight of a tree spearing through the mist. Another followed, then another, and then I was sailing between them, branches slapping my face, battering my arms and legs. I flew free of the trees and straight into the side of the fence at the base of the tower. Razor wire slashed my hands as I struck the top of the fence with enough force to knock the wind out of me. I fell backward, landing in the dirt, shredded nylon billowing down to cover my face. I struggled free from the remains of my chute and unbuckled the pack, leaving it all in a heap by the fence. I limped for the jeep. Above I could see no sign of the creature. I hauled the door open and started the engine, praying that the faulty spark plug I'd been meaning to replace for months would do me this one last solid. The engine sputtered to life. Something flew overhead. A blur. I caught sight of long limbs spread wide, of membranous wings billowing in the sky, eyes locked on mine as the predator glided silently overhead, banking, turning toward me. I threw the Jeep into reverse, tires spinning in loose dirt. My head bounced off of the headrest as I crashed through the gate. Then I was off, jostling down the gravel-packed road. I didn't stop driving until I reached home. Autopilot must have kicked in because I drove myself to the ER. They must have thought I was some kind of crazy person, eyes wide, paint soaked with piss. They had to peel my fingers from the bloody steering wheel before they could get me inside. It's been 2 weeks now, and the stitches across my arms and hands are only just healing. I'll have the scars for the rest of my life. I'm writing this with the doors locked and my stepdad's old 12-gauge leaned against the desk next to me. I should get a dog. Maybe 2. The mist is back, and somehow the mountains just don't seem as safe as they used to. The screen of my phone just lit up. A text from the company. Another job. Another site. I don't think I'll answer. Third story. This story was shared by you/Kahui, so credits to him. I encountered something and I am genuinely scared to leave my home. On May 9th of this year, I went on a walk in the patch of woods near my house in northern Wisconsin with my dog and older sister. My father recently passed away, and to attempt to reconnect with my family, I took matters into my own hands and invited them all over for a week. Only my sister showed, and I wasn't planning on anyone else showing. My sister has always been the stereotypical blue-haired, short, astrology girl and believes in everything you can think about. When we were 12 and 14, she took me to her friend's house to hunt a skinwalker that just turned out to be a stray dog, and since then we haven't done anything in the woods due to her sudden urge to stay inside and smoke pot for months. But that's beside the point. We were walking along a path around dusk and it started to get very cold. We decided that we should set up camp as we are far too away from home to not get back before 6 a.m. and don't feel like hanging out in darkness. After setting up a small fire and tent, she called it a night while I tended to the fire. Roughly 2 hours after she fell asleep, I went to relieve myself behind a large dead tree. After coming back to camp, I noticed that there was a foul, almost rotten smell around the camp. I reached for my bag to get some incense and realized my bag was missing. I panicked for a second until I saw it near the edge of the light made by the fire. Thinking nothing of it, I stood up, and as I walked toward my bag I froze. My bag was being slowly dragged farther out of the light by a very pale, human-like hand. This hand was in no way human as I came to my senses and noticed the large claws and shiny glass-like skin that seemed to be covered in a clear liquid. "Who's there? Give me back my bag," I said while reaching for my pistol on my belt. Just as I fully unsheathed my pistol, the hand suddenly recoiled. However, now I could see a face. A large, terrifying face with milky white skin and eyes, with the bluest veins under the eyes. I saw that the thing's tongue was long and was the only thing moving other than the trees in the wind. Its antlers were black. Like they were made of mold. I lost it. I shot the damn thing, and with the muzzle flash, I saw a massive, deer-like humanoid that must have been 7 to 8 feet tall. I fell to the ground, covering my ears as the creature let out a loud scream sounding like a moose that had been shoved into a meat grinder alive. I came to my senses and saw the thing charge me. I froze as it just to the right of the tent and tipped it over. My sister was already awake at this point as the scream rose her. After what had to have been 2 hours of making the fire go from a small forge into a massive bonfire to illuminate the surrounding woods. Eventually I fell asleep with my Glock 19 in my hands, which was itching to shoot anything that moved. I awoke to my sister shaking me at what must have been 10 a.m. as the sun was already well in the sky. After getting our belongings, we began walking back to the house, checking our surroundings as we went. We didn't want that thing to follow us back to the house and torment us there. When we were able to see the light coming from my yard lights, which I forgot to turn off, I froze. On the top of my shed there was a gutted what seemed to be a deer without its hind legs. We dropped our stuff and ran to the house, where we called the police. I got fined for wasting their time. I tried to forget this and move on with my life, but on the 19th of this month, I saw that thing in my fucking yard, digging a hole while a dead deer was on its broad, pale, skinny shoulders. It was staring at me. It saw me. It saw me. I blinked and it was gone. I know what I saw. I need help. I have 3 guns in my home, not including my pistol, which I always have on me. Should I try to kill the thing? Please help me. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.